Today it's my pleasure to welcome Jared Knott to The Truth. He is an author. He's authored two books. One is Tiny Blunders, Big Disasters, and then his second work is 39 Tiny Mistakes That Changed the World Forever. Interesting stuff, Jared. Welcome to The Truth.
Well, thank you very much. The truth is a good thing.
So if you had to pick one tiny blunder that had the biggest disaster as a consequence, what would it be?
Well, there's so many, but when you ask the question, the one that comes to mind was one of the biggest events in history, and that was Christopher Columbus's, of course, discovery of the New World for Europeans at that time. And it ended up being a magnificent mistake that had glorious results, but at the same time had enormously painful consequences. I'll explain what I mean.
Tell us the story.
Yes. Now, scholars had known for a long time that the world was round, even way back in the time of Aristotle, when they would have an eclipse of the Earth's shadow over the moon, they could see that it was round in shape. So for a long time, they knew the world was round. And then Aristophanes, a gentleman at the Great Library at Alexandria, was able to figure out not only that the world was round, but the approximate size of the Earth with amazing accuracy. He had a report up in Alexandria from what is now called Anwar, down farther to the south, but they said on the longest day of the year, a stick in the ground cast no shadow, and the sun would hit the bottom of the well without touching the sides. Whereas where he was, farther to the north in Alexandria, on that same day, the stick in the ground had a very definite shadow, and also the sun would hit the side of the well before going to the bottom. So he decided that, of course, that must mean that there was a curve to the Earth, and he had somebody pace off the distance between Alexandria and Anwar and did the calculus and was able to determine the curve of the Earth, and from that, the approximate size of the Earth way back 200 some odd years before Christ. So educated people knew the world was round and its approximate size. However, here's what happened. There was also a man, Marius of Tyre, who did calculations, and he calculated that the Earth was actually much smaller than it really was, number one. And number two, when Christopher Columbus was looking at his numbers, he made the mistake of using an Italian mile instead of an Arabic mile, so he compounded the mistake. And so Christopher Columbus thought that the world was only about 75% as big as it really was. Well, he deduced that the Canary Islands were only about 2,200 miles from Japan. Japan was known to exist, but it was only 2,200 miles away, and they were desperate to get the spices from the Spice Islands. When the fall of Constantinople took place, the Ottoman Empire closed down the Silk Road, and so there's no way to get spices to Europeans. So they thought, well, let's sail directly west. It's only 2,200 miles. We'll sail over there to the Spice Islands, get all these spices, sail back, and it'll be a bonanza for us. Of course, the problem was that he had miscalculated on top of a miscalculation, and it was like 10,200 miles from the Canary Islands all the way over to Asia. Plus, we had the North and South American continent in the way. So anyway, he went to England, tried to persuade them, let me have some ships to sail west. No, you're all wrong, Columbus. Went to France. No, you're all wrong, Columbus. Went to Spain. No, Portugal. No, you're all wrong, Columbus. But then he went to the Italians, and Queen, it was King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella. Queen Isabella, it was not a romantic name, but she took a liking to Christopher Columbus, and she had talked to her husband, the king. Okay, we're going to give you 3 small ships, the Ina, the Pina, and the Santa Maria, and let you sail west and see if you can make it to the Spice Islands. Okay. Well, all right. So it was this magnificent mistake. He was off by 8,000 plus miles. So, and the crew, by the way, didn't want to go. They were assigned to this mission. They didn't really want to be there. Right? So they sabotaged the rudder on one of the ships, but they were able to fix it. And so off they go, sailing to the west. And after 3 or 4 weeks, there was close to a mutiny. Okay, they said we're out here in the middle of nowhere in the ocean. We can't see the land any place. We're all going to die out here. So I'll tell you what, give me 3 more days. Give me 3 more days. We don't see land in 3 days. I will turn around and I will sail back. Well, luckily, 3 days there, they saw light. Okay, and then they get close to the light. It turns out this land, and it's in the Bahamas. And so they land there. They come ashore. They claim this land in the name of the king and queen of Spain. Well, So far, so good. It's a tiny mistake, but it led to a beautiful, wonderful result, right? Oh, and of course, the United States of America and the whole new world came as a result of it. Well, not so fast. Okay, yes, all that's true, but there was also a horrible, ugly underside. The Europeans brought with them measles, smallpox, whooping cough, malaria, these terrible diseases.
Oh,
The people in the New World had no immunity in their system to these diseases. And so there was just devastation, hundreds of thousands of people dying in just a matter of months. 3 years after Columbus landed, 90% of the population of the Bahamas had been completely wiped out. And as the Europeans spread across the New World into North America and so on, they brought with them these horrible diseases and hundreds of thousands of millions of dying as a result of smallpox in particular, as well as measles and the others. And then, so it was a terrible disaster for them. And then for their part, the new people in the New World gave syphilis to the sailors, Columbus's sailors. They took syphilis back with them to Europe. One estimate is within 20 years, 15% of the population had syphilis, which is can be fatal, but it's also a horribly disfiguring disease. It also can cause insanity. It causes enormous pain. So we had this glorious discovery of the New World and all the good things that have come from that. We also had hundreds of thousands, even millions of people, primarily people from the New World, dying of disease, and of course the syphilis being spread to Europe. So it was both a great blessing and a horrible, horrible, miserable curse, all based on a tiny mistake, which of course Christopher Columbus' miscalculation. Of course, it was just a matter of time before Europe discovered the New World, but it was a horrible thing when it did happen.
what a fascinating story. So, are you, Jared, an historian? How did you acquire all this knowledge?
Yeah, I'm a history buff, and I think you start digging into something, and the internet has been a huge blessing because it's just this world library at your fingertips, and you can go into a subject like that. There's 5, 6, 7, 10 articles you can find in just a matter of minutes on any subject that you name. So that's been a huge blessing.
So, refresh my memory. When Christopher Columbus, on his first mission, landed in the Bahamas, did he return to Spain after that, or did he push forward to America, or did he even know that America was maybe 50 or 100 miles further west?
Yes, he never made it to the mainland, and he made 4 voyages. He took a lot of captives back with him and brought them back to Europe, most of whom died from results of diseases. And he never did admit that he made a mistake till the end of his life. He maintained that no, he had landed in India, and these people were Indians, which of course they were not. And the North and South America might have been named for him if he had seen the truth in time, but it was not. So it was named after Amerigo Vespucci, another navigator who was saying that these are a separate continent altogether.
Amazing. So bring us forward. What are some of the tiny mistakes, tiny blunders that have brought big disasters or impact in the modern era?
Yes, in October the 7th, took place primarily because of a major lapse on the part of the Israeli intelligence system. The Mossad and the other intelligence divisions they have there in Israel have this storied record of being extremely accomplished, very reliable, the best of the world. And maybe they were suffering from a kind of victory disease or overconfidence because there were signals and information coming to them. The president of Egypt says that 3 days before the October 7th attack, he had warned the Netanyahu government that something big like that was going to happen. There was also other indications they saw people practicing with those hang gliders, etc. And there were other indications, all of which got ignored. And there was Mossad's low point in their long, very successful history. This was a low point. They just missed it altogether. It was a complete and total surprise. It took them completely unawares. And of course, the disaster took place. Well, that's led, if they had been preemptive and gone in and attacked the Hamas a day or 2 or 3 before the attack, took the fight to them, and they could have had a spoiler attack. They could have neutralized the attack. The whole thing could have been greatly reduced, not taken place at all. As it was, they missed it completely. The horrible atrocities take place. Israel says, okay, you want this war? We're going to get this war. They've defeated Hamas. They've defeated Hezbollah in the north. They defeated Iran that tried to attack them with rockets. Okay, they've won. But it would have been better if the war had never taken place in the first place. If they had not been so asleep at the switch, it would not have.
So is November 22nd, 1963 on your list? JFK's assassination?
No, that, by the way, I have a third book coming out, which is not going to be out for another year or so. And it's the title of that book is The Hushed Up Murders of Famous People. They murdered big and got away with it. And there is serious evidence, and I can't say it's true, but there's serious evidence. And Robert Kennedy Jr. and Tucker Carlson believe in this, that the CIA was involved in the murder of John Kennedy, which is just shocking to believe that could be true. The CIA has admitted having a relationship with Lee Harvey Oswald. And there was a lot of indications that, in fact, they may have been involved in the assassination, shocking as it is. So that's not so much as a tiny mistake as it is a horrible conspiracy. I'm not saying it's true.
I am.
There's serious evidence to indicate that it may be true, and it's, of course, totally shocking.
Our listeners know we this is a subject that we have spent an inordinate amount of time on the truth, and we've had many authors on the truth that have talked about it. The first one was David Talbot. It was actually our very first broadcast. He wrote a book called The Devil's Triangle, and he lays it out in 850 pages exactly how Allen Dulles and the CIA orchestrated and conducted the assassination, and then Hoover and Johnson and a host of others, including a complicit media, spent the next 60 years covering it up. Even the mainstream media to this day, in spite of a mountain of evidence that Lee Harvey Oswald did not even pull a trigger, let alone the trigger of the fatal shot, there's ample evidence to support that Oswald was not even in the sniper's nest, but instead in the break room of the school book depository, where he was seen sipping on a Coca-Cola 5 minutes before the assassination, and then again 10 minutes after, when a police officer and the manager of the school book depository rushed in on their way to the sniper's nest. The cop said, "Who is that?" And the manager said, "Oh, he works here." And they went on up. Oswald, when he was arrested, said, "I'm just a patsy." And so we could spend another hour on that. Our listeners are like, "Oh, John, no, please, not again. Let's keep it moving." So give us some more, Jared, of things that you think in our lifetime that have been tiny blunders with big consequences.
Yes, you go back to the 2000 election, and there was the teaser for it is a single document, poorly designed by one single clerk in one single county, changed the outcome of the 2000 election and led directly to a major war. A nice lady, I won't say her name, but she was designing what is called the butterfly ballot. It's a ballot with a list of names on the left and the right, and a series of punch holes in the center. It was very confusing the way it was designed. And the number 2 name on the left page was Al Gore, but it was the number 3 punch hole. The number 2 punch hole belonged to Pat Buchanan on the right page. People got confused and they punched the punch hole for Pat Buchanan, but they meant to be punching the punch hole for Al Gore. Thousands in the surrounding counties, Pat Buchanan got maybe 150 votes per county. In this particular county, gets 3, 4, 5,000, like 3,600 votes, something like that. Some people punched both punch holes, which had validated the ballot. About 5,000 or 6,000 were validated. So Al Gore ended up losing that county by like 460 votes. He would have most probably won it by 3, 4, 5,000 votes. He would have won Florida. He would have won the election. He was adamantly opposed to the war in Iraq against Saddam Hussein. And so the whole thing would not have taken place. We had this nice lady, I won't say her name, very nice, intelligent lady. I had her on one of the morning talk shows back in the early 2000s. They said to her, people are saying that you're the one responsible with this war because of this poorly designed ballot. She was in tears. Yes, ma'am, we appreciate the fact that you're crying, but we have 50,000 dead people and $2 trillion down the drain, all because of a single tiny mistake. Of course, that's just one pivotal mistake. George Bush would have to take responsibility for the war and other people too.
Fascinating story. I remember that election very well, and the hanging chabs and the guy with the thick glasses and microscope trying to figure out who the elector intended to vote for. And so anything in the last 5 or 10 years that sticks out for you?
Let's see, of course, the October 7th and the 2000 election, but then we go back there into the 20th century. There's some significant mistakes there. The Watergate, it was interesting what happened there. The teaser there is a single piece of tape rotated several inches the wrong direction, changed the outcome of the Vietnam War. The United States might very well have won, except for the single tiny mistake. It had to do with the Watergate break-in. When they were jimmying the lock from the parking garage into the office building, they were told to pull the striker of the door down with a single piece of tape in the vertical position. They made a mistake and they put it in the horizontal position so that you see the tape across the door face. So as the night watchman, Frank Wills, is walking down the hallway, oops, what's this? We got tape on the door. He calls the Washington, D.C. police. I think he had to call them twice. They call the uniformed officer on duty in that section of the city to go with it to Watergate and check it out. But there's a strong rumor indicating that he was intoxicated in a local bar and could not respond to the call. So they had to send the bum patrol, 3 officers dressed as hobos in a jalopy car. They pull up to the Watergate. They're not recognized as police officers. They come in and they arrest James Ford. Watergate begins. Boom, 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 the scandal. And Henry Kissinger gave a television interview. He said the plan was to go in and bomb the living daylights out of the North Vietnamese who were violating the treaty. They were so weak politically they couldn't. So South Vietnam collapses, Nixon administration collapses. It all falls apart because of a single piece of tape rotated several inches the wrong direction and a drunk cop.
Absolutely fascinating. So you've got another book that you're working on, Hushed Up Murders of Famous People. Can you give us some snippets?
Well, yes, there was a long list of people famous people. Sometimes famous people are in powerful positions and they have a lot of enemies who want to do them in. Jeffrey Epstein did not, evidence indicates, did not commit suicide in his cell. He claimed that he strangled himself, committed suicide 3 feet off the floor with a bed sheet around his neck. Well, he had broken bones in the lower part of his neck, which is consistent with somebody strangling him, not with a ligature on the side. He was probably murdered by people who wanted to hush him up. We know all about Orgy Island, a lot of famous people, etc. So that's one example. Natalie Wood, a lot of unanswered questions about Natalie Wood. Marilyn Monroe, this one's a shocker, is that, of course, it's an established fact that Robert Kennedy and Peter Lawford and a doctor were at Marilyn Monroe's house the day she died. And then the homicide investigator in Los Angeles who handled the case from the very beginning believed that it was a murder from the get-go. None of the evidence fit together, which is shocking. That would mean that the Kennedys, both Robert Kennedy and John Kennedy, were having an affair with Marilyn Monroe. She's quoted as saying, "You all are treating me like a piece of meat." At one point, she was yelling and screaming a lot, and Robert Kennedy supposedly putting a pillow over her mouth to shut her up. She got to the press and spewed all that she knew about the Kennedys. It was massively embarrassing. So it is alleged, and it's seriously alleged, that Marilyn Monroe was murdered by the Kennedys, which, oh my gosh, how shocking is that? That's in the book. Stalin killed a number of people. The famous ballerina he had poisoned. Other people had poisoned. Putin, of course, with his death squads, had murdered a number of people, his oligarch friends, ex-friends. One of them was escaped the United States. Was at an expensive condominium a high-rise condominium in Washington, D.C., I guess not too far from the White House. I guess he thought he was safe there with his bodyguards. He gets murdered along with other people. There's also kind of a comical word, dark comedy word called defenestration, which means being flung out of a window. Well, there were at least two of Putin's oligarch friends that for some reason one of them jumped out of a hospital window at 6 stories up, probably didn't jump, probably was pushed. And there was another example of defenestration. So that there's a list of murders there. Also, Acclaim, the continuum, we're 99% sure that Jimmy Hoffa was murdered by the mob 2 months before he died. That man who actually committed the mob killer came forward and told the whole story. So that's just near certainty that it happened that way. That's the one end of the spectrum. At the other end of the spectrum, you have J. Edgar Hoover, who died suddenly in his bedroom one morning, keeled over and died. The assertion is that someone was able to slip into his house, put poison in his toothpaste, and he was murdered, poisoned in that way. Well, that's a serious possibility. We can't say for certain it happened that way, but as soon as he died, agents went over there and scooped up all of his dossiers they had of so many people. He was buried without a resume. Sorry, not the resume, buried without an autopsy. And so it's a suspicious circumstance. You can't say for certain. You can say Jimmy Hoffa's certainty, but you can't say by J. Edgar Hoover. And all up and down the line, it would go from a 99% certainty to a 35% serious possibility. You have a long list of people. There's also celebrities themselves, famous people, who themselves may have been guilty of murder. Frank Sinatra may have murdered at least, or had at least one person murdered for personal reasons, and there may have been others as well. So it's just a whole treasure trove of these juicy scandals involving major personalities, and that's what that book is about. But now that book is not written. It's not written yet. Although some people have said that's the juiciest of them all, and it does sound very juicy. But now we have 2 books. We have Tiny Blunders, Big Disasters, 39 Tiny Mistakes That Changed the World Forever. It's book number 1, which I'm happy to say has been on the bestseller list at Amazon for 4 years, sold over 30,000 copies. Book 2 is thank you. And book 2 is Tiny Blunders, Big Disasters. Book 2, The Many Tiny Mistakes that changed the world forever. So we got the 2 books. The second book is in pre-sale right now. It's doing very, very well. We sold almost 1,000 copies just in pre-sale. It's getting ready to come out next month. So we have high hopes. The first book's won like 6 awards. I hope the second book's going to win a lot of awards too. And there's serious people who think it would make a good TV series, but that's a whole different subject.
And then when is the third book going to be finished and published, do you suppose?
It'll be a year from now. It'll be about a year from now, a year from next spring, not this spring, but next spring, it should be available. And it's, when I mentioned it to people, it's a very interesting topic. And there's a treasure trove of all kinds of things that have happened there. So it's going to be fun to write and hopefully very fun to read.
So what's it like to be an author in 2025? Mechanically, how do you approach it? Like your upcoming book, how will you perform the research, and then how will you actually write the book? Do you sit down and write it out by longhand, or you type it on a computer, or you don't use Chat GPT for any of it, do you?
Gosh, no. It's GPT. Now, by the way, if you read any subject from like this Encyclopedia Britannica, okay, it comes out as kind of a boilerplate kind of a thing. I suspect that Britannica people may be using ChatGPT. It's kind of a flat, dull, wordy boilerplate kind of writing. I find it very dull. So I flatter myself my writing is much more interesting and full of jolts and surprises and things like that, and quirky little things, and that I hope to think very, very interesting. But no, I don't use ChatGPT at all.
Well, it wasn't an accusation. I just have to ask the
Sure.
question, stir the pot a little bit, keep our listeners interested. So,
Sure.
so what's the process? Tell us how you do. Actually sit down and write.
I make it way back in the 10th grade that they're teaching us how to write. And said the first thing you do, writing an article, whatever it is, you write out an outline. Well, sure enough, that's exactly what I do, and it works very well. If you don't have an outline, you get into the story, and now what do I do next? Do I put this element number third? No, it's best to have an outline, and outline not only for each individual chapter, but an outline for the entire book. And so I start with the outline, then I go to a particular subject, and I tend to go with the one that is most exciting to write at that particular moment. It gives you a lot of momentum. And start writing it following the outline, and it's much better to do it that way because the elements fall together much better. And I find it just a lot of fun to write. My wife gets on me. You need to do such and such for the house, get away from that 4-foot square world that you're in. So I have to devote a certain amount of time to my wife and keep her happy. That's the highest priority. And then also devote so many hours a day towards writing the book. That fortunately, I have a good time writing and doing the research. And it's fun to share it with people in the spoken word. It's also fun to share it in the written word as well. And I put a lot of twists and turns and kind of novelties into my writing.
So how many hours a day do you spend on your craft?
It probably only averages out to between 2 and 2.5, maybe 3 hours a day. There's some people that sit down and write 4 or 5 hours a day and can churn out 300 or 400 words a day. Some days I spend like 6, 7 hours, but it's more like only just 2.5 hours. It takes a good year, almost a year and a half for me to write a book.
Fascinating. Well, those are great stories. And thank you for the history lesson on so many topics that we've talked about today. Jared Knott, he's an author. Tiny Blunders, Big Disasters, 39 Tiny Mistakes That Changed the World Forever, and a certain-to-be blockbuster, Hushed Up Murders of Famous People. Happy New Year, Jared, and thank you for coming on with us today.
If you want to, please go to the website, tinyblundersbigdisasters.com, tinyblundersbigdisasters.com. You have 2.5 free chapters there. You have a fun quiz there, have a portrait gallery, have a book trailer there. It's kind of a fun place to visit. And we have a special running on the book for this week.
Very good. A John Gordon Truth special, as it were. And yes, I will encourage our listeners to do just that. And so give it to us one more time, and we'll put it in their comments for our listeners.
Yes, sir. It's tinyblundersbigdisasters.com. tinyblundersbigdisasters.com. That's my website. You go there and you see you get 2 free chapters. You get the book trailers. You get the portrait gallery and a fun quiz, and it's a kind of a fun place to visit.
Well, thank you again, Jared. I hope you're listening to us on Saturdays from noon to 2 on the John Fredericks Radio Network right there in Atlanta. We're also in Memphis, Nashville, Richmond, Norfolk, Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, and the entire state of West Virginia. We're also on Getter, Rumble, and YouTube Live. And, of course, the CDM Press 13 digital platforms on the World Wide Web. Jared Knott, thank you so much. Happy New Year. And let's welcome in the Golden Age. We didn't talk about that, but
absolutely,
what a difference a day makes.
It certainly does. It's an honor to be here.
Thank you. We'll have you back again soon, I hope.
Thank you.